All right, this time I believe we are doing separate recordings. All is well. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Once and Future Parent. Mandy is not with us today. It's just myself and Pete Wright. And we're talking about a time that is full of joy and wonder and absolutely no parental stress whatsoever, the end of the year holidays. Pete, how are we doing today?
'Tis the season, and I have to tell you, I am full of energy and joy and light because my kids are adults. It's a
Your kids are
whole
adults?
different game. Yeah.
That does
Oh,
seem like it's a very different thing. And my kid is too young to actually quite understand what's going on.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So there's a window between us, and we
exactly,
exist on
exactly.
the delightful fringe of it.
Mandy's right in the middle. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate she can't join us. And for those listening, we originally meant to record this episode with Mandy and a friend of hers before Thanksgiving, because there's kind of a Thanksgiving into Christmas is kind of one long holiday season, and into all the end of the year holidays, and then New Year's, whether it's Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever else you're celebrating. We had some technical problems, so you'll probably get to listen to that either before or after this. But now here we are. And just kind of establishing people what we're talking about. Am I understanding that your family is culturally, if not religiously, Christian? So you guys celebrate Christmas at this time of year, correct?
We do. So we just as we record this, we finished the run of Halloween to Thanksgiving here in the United States, and we're leading into Christmas.
Got it. Yeah, because I come from an interfaith family. I'm myself religiously Christian. My father's Jewish. People can argue if I'm Jewish or not. I don't want to get into that, but certainly Judaism's been a big part of me, ethically, ethnically, and socially and culturally and the like. And growing up in my household, we certainly celebrated both Christmas and Hanukkah, and then particularly after my parents divorced, so I have some experience of kind of both of those holiday cultures. Talk to me about what it was. First of all, let me back up way back.
Mhm.
What were the holidays like for you and your partner before you had kids?
Oh dear. Okay. We we I think we traveled, but we weren't
Yeah,
married for very long. We weren't together for many years before we had kids. So I don't think we had enough time for us as a couple to sort of imprint
mm-hmm.
anything beyond what we had grown up with. Like it's just this
Right.
kind of hodgepodge of, hey, this is what my parents did, this is what your parents did, and we kind of did some of everything, and nothing really stuck until we had kids.
Right.
And so I think we would travel one way or the other. We were lucky to have both of our sets of parents in
Mm-hmm.
the same city, so it was easy for us to go see everybody all at once and do that madness. And then once we had kids, if you wanted to see us, you came to us.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I really had kind of like two different seasons of my life when it came to Christmas, and now entering a third. And
Hmm.
as I talk about from time to time in this episode, but especially this week, I'm going to be talking a lot about my mother, who those who've listened before may know she passed away about 9 years ago now. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And Christmas was absolutely her season. It was her favorite time of year. She loved the presents. She loved the music and the food. And more than anything, my mother was someone for whom more than anything, my mother loved creating space. She wasn't really a host. She didn't like having people over, but she did it all the time because she knew I loved it.
Hmm.
But she just loved, if I started dating someone, it was like, okay, well, what do you want to get them for Christmas? I had a friend who didn't have a place to go. Okay, they're welcome to come over for Christmas. And Christmas was really about extravagance in our household. And I'm not going to get too much into this, but I've always thought it's interesting that both Christmas and Hanukkah, at least, as well as I think some of the other holidays as well, certainly solstice is like this in many of the pagan traditions. It's about the idea of that in the midst of darkness, in the midst of cold, in the midst of winter, we don't think we have enough. And so let's actually celebrate that no, there is light in the darkness. There is the oil will continue burning in Hanukkah, or the light
Hmm.
that's in the darkness of Christmas, or just we know that the sun will return of solstice. And so the idea was that therefore it's a time of extravagance, of that we trust that we're going to have enough, that spring will come, and that's gifts, it's food, it's just all of that kind of stuff. And so I'll probably talk more about that as we go on. But so that was my childhood, and then even to adulthood with my mother still. And then when my mother passed away, but it still was always a very small gathering. It was me, my mother, my sister, and then whatever friends me and my sister had hanging around. And this was well into our like 20s or 30s. And then after my mother passed away, I didn't really know what to do for a couple of years. And then I started going to adult Christmas. That Christmas with adults, to be clear, that
Right.
not anything else.
Well, wait a minute. I feel
Yeah.
like you dropped the word extravagant as a younger person, and I would like a little bit of specificity. What does extravagance mean? What does it look like in your house? Let's say I'm there and you're 15, 18, I don't know, 12 years old, somewhere in your teens. What does it look like?
So, well, first of all, it did mean an awful lot of presents, especially when we were kids. And there's both a positive and a negative to this. And this is something I could do a whole bunch of thinking on the philosophy and the theology of it.
Yeah.
There were definitely years after my parents' divorce when my mother was not in a good place, when she would be spending ridiculous amounts of money on presents for me and my sister while she had holes in her shoes. That's, to me, always a kind of defining aspect. But so a lot of it was that, but it also was just like, hey, everyone's favorite snacks or foods we're going to have. What's your
Yeah.
favorite meal? We're going to have that as one of the meals. Christmas Day and then December 26th were often what she would refer to as grazing, where we didn't have like a set meal. It would be just every couple of hours
Yeah.
we'd put out a
Fend for
charcuterie
yourself.
plate.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
so it was,
Shared
and all the kind of
force. Yeah.
foods that are just, like over the top and ridiculous, and we don't actually
Yeah.
need it. Christmas time was the time where is it too much? It's just never a question that was asked.
Right, right. And how much of that do you feel was exacerbated by your parents' divorce? I know. I'm asking a question about tropes.
Yeah.
Like, did your family fall into the tropey? Okay, your parents are trying to make up for what they saw as a perceived lack in their ability to maintain their marriage, and they were gonna like adorn you with gifts and things.
Here I am trying to share with you this time of just childlike wonder and theology and joy, and you're asking the hard psychological questions. The fact is, and because I had to wrestle with exactly that. Because
Yeah.
to I've often had this kind of incredibly romanticized version, but no, that was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
My parents had incredibly divergent economic paths after the divorce. It's kind of one of my first real lessons in misogyny and sexism in the world. My parents were both incredibly successful lawyers. They both had gone to the same Ivy League law school, Columbia. My mother had some real mental health issues and things like that. But for most of my teenage years, my father was doing quite well financially, and my mother had holes in her shoes.
Yeah.
And I absolutely think that my mother I don't think she would have ever seen it as buying our love, but I think she definitely felt a fear that my father was going to be able to do that. And it was never even about like the competition. It was more, again, here we're getting into so much of my own child psychology. So I'm not trying to make this a therapy session, but like one important thing is being a kid in the city. My parents lived 3 blocks from each other for most of my teenage years. So the whole like you're with your dad 3 days a week and then your mom drives you over to her house. Like we just went, I was like, oh mom, what are you making for dinner tonight? I don't really want chicken. Dad, what are you making? You're making pasta? Okay, I'll go to dad's house tonight. Like,
Yeah.
and so I think one of my mother's fears was if the fun new toy was all at my dad's house, then that's always where I'd want to spend time.
Right.
So I think there was some of that with my mother, but I also want to be really careful about that because I really do believe that it was for her. It was more than that. Like, and again, I'm probably overly romanticizing it, but it was really this. My mother was a person who loved religion, but she was not, she would like, if I told her a friend of mine was Muslim and we were going to go to a Muslim ceremony, she would think it was wonderful and she would find spirituality in it. And she very much had an idea of, we're all just searching for the truth. And I think so, more than anything, this idea of there is enough, even when we don't think there is. Those were words she would use all the time at Christmas time.
Yeah.
And so I think
Let's
for
not
her-
fall prey to the trance that is scarcity. Right.
Right,
Like, let's-
exactly.
yeah.
And I think that's exactly what is at the heart of the theology of a lot of these traditions that happen in the dead of winter time.
Right.
When it feels like we should be embracing scarcity, because why would you possibly think there's anything but scarcity in the dead of winter? So yes, I do think my mom really believed it. When I think of the speech at the end of A Christmas Carol, known through me as the most authentic version out there, the Muppets Christmas Carol. They said of Scrooge, he was a man who kept Christmas every day of his life. That is 100% my mother.
Okay.
So I had all that in mind, and I think for a long time I was like, I couldn't recreate that. It wouldn't make any sense. And then I met Mary's family, and Mary's family was at the time a whole bunch of adults, none of us had kids yet, who all lived in the same area here in the Twin Cities. At this point, Mary and I were living in Madison, but we went up to the Twin Cities to visit. God, I was just trying to rant about my childhood. I'm sorry, please.
No, I just want to say, foundationally, this stuff matters at the holidays, and I
really
think it's
does.
important to look at what we drag into our perception and the cultural sort of identity that we want to have at Christmas. So I deeply appreciate you walking through this, because I think it matters.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear more of yours, but yeah, what it was is actually, even before Mary and her family, it's not coincidence, I think, that both me and my sister married people who have huge families that do huge family Christmases. And the second year after my mother's death, I was kind of coming out of a really bad mental health episode where I'd not been in a good state. I was rebuilding my life. My sister had been dating this guy for a while. I got invited to be at their family's at Christmas. I didn't know any of these people. And again, it's the same. They had like 4 kids and aunts and uncles and all these kind of things. And I show up, and everyone in the family has bought me a gift,
Wow,
and
yeah.
nothing extravagant, but just everyone wanted to show me that I was welcomed.
Yeah.
And it was this huge meal, and it was lots of people, and that's now what Christmas is, and that's what now we host Christmas every year, and it's until recently just been a whole bunch of adults, and gift giving is a much smaller part because we're adults. If we want stuff, we buy our own stuff.
Yeah.
But we always do a big white elephant gift exchange, which I love, and there's always just a huge amount of food, and to me, it's really the day of just like, we go to the supermarket and, we go to like a nice kind of specialty food store, the kind of place we'd normally not even look twice at, but just like, oh, that looks fun. Sure, we'll get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. That's good.
and now we have
yeah.
kids.
Yeah, and that brings us back to when I hijacked the conversation a moment ago, and took you back in time. Now you have kids, and now you get to both you and Mary get to drag all that baggage into the now and decide how you're going to orchestrate the future for your child's expectations of the holidays. Where do you begin?
Well, especially because, and I imagine the more cynical out there already doing this, if not yelling at their device that's playing podcast and throwing things at it, everything I've just said can also be seen as an utter and complete romanticization of the very worst of capitalism and the spend kind of idea. Because so much of the excess that I talk about is stuff that we buy, that we purchase. And I think it's something that we're really wrestling with. And here I want to start hearing a lot more about your traditions and stuff like that, because I like having, I like being able to go, oh, that thing that every time my spouse, like we made a joke once that, my spouse now Mary has to be very careful expressing desires around me in December.
Oh,
because
yes.
like there was one time where we were watching an episode, I believe, of The Office, like 3 days before Christmas, and someone gives this ridiculous gift of I think 49 packets of ramen, and she's like, wow, that's a great gift. And I just pull out my phone and make a couple things on Amazon, and all of a sudden this huge box shows up, and I take out a couple of them, so it's exactly 40. Maybe it's actually been 69 because I think it's not a very sophomoric humor.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, like. Yes,
Yeah.
I think it's something we're really going to wrestle with, is how do we make sure that it doesn't just become about stuff? How does it not become about buying junk because that's what we think we're supposed to do, or showing love in that way? While also honoring this idea of abundance and fighting off scarcity, while also not making it about mass consumption.
Yeah.
So talk to me about for you guys, like when you started having kids and they started getting to an age where, a guy is supposed to come down a chimney and tell them that they're good or bad, if and get presents or not.
Well, and I'll just say, if you're listening with little kids and you have a certain structure to the way you handle those expectations around guys who come down chimneys, I guess I would ask you to turn off the podcast, because so much of what I'm about to say really hinges on our belief system and how we handle the adaptation of broad cultural tradition in our sort of microculture of our family.
Yeah.
So consider this the holiday spoiler horn now. We started, like, both of my wife and I lived in our home. I think you used extravagant, and that was, I think we grew up there. We had families who, we weren't made of money, but our families had good jobs and saved well, and intentionally put aside a kind of Christmas nest egg so they could do fun things at the holidays. And so I think my parents were very conscious of the things I was most interested in throughout the year, and would really intentionally buy gifts for me that were designed to further those experiences. I was playing the piano, I was doing more sort of musical stuff. I would get a beautiful keyboard, I would get a great stereo, I would get, like, there were things that they would give me, and so it would usually be like, there's a big gift and it's about a thing that I'm really interested in, and they were very thoughtful about it, and so we tried to be equally thoughtful. I think our adaptation, when Kira and I started feeling the pressure of consumerism, it's different now than it was when our kids were teeny tiny. I think it's more intense. Was about the time when the kids were starting to talk about stuff at school, and it's your parents, it's not real, it's all that. And we had to come to terms with how we wanted to talk about it. And so we made the really conscious decision to sort of retcon Christmas traditions. And we told essentially the truth that everyone in this family, when you get to a certain age, we're all Santa. And you get to be as thoughtful as we have been for you, for everyone else. And if something strikes you that you want to make or build or whatever, you get to give something without the expectation that the recipient knows it was from you. It can be completely anonymous under the guise of a gift from Santa. It can be placed in the middle of the night, just like we have been doing for you the whole time. So I'd say the last, 8 or 10 years around our house, when we have everybody here and grandparents come in, it's become absolute mayhem at about midnight, because we're all trying to out Santa one another, and it's delightful. It is one of the most fun experiences that we could have. And it was some rough sailing, the first time the kids had to discover that, they're now in on this family secret, and we're all going to be pretending now. But I mean, after a little while of discomfort, they were all on board. And that has created, I think, a more thoughtful sort of atmosphere of love and generosity than I could ever have expected, because it truly isn't about everyone buys everyone a gift. It's about figuring out the most thoughtful path. And sort of expressing that goodness.
Quick interruption, by the way. Someone's vacuuming outside my office. Can you hear it?
I can.
Okay, I can probably edit that out, I'm sure.
Well, I think if you want me to run it through Adobe, I think Adobe would clean that up.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll let you take first crack at the sound files.
Sure.
I'm just recording a little bit of silence of it. Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. And I think when I think about, like, what do I want to teach my kids about that, because you're right, that edge of generosity can lead to consumerism is so dangerous. And for me, that is something I've definitely discovered as I've become an adult, is that, I love getting stuff, but the giving is what I love. And I love, to me, the face of someone as the thing they didn't expect or that they never knew was out there. And a lot of times it is, maybe it's something I make or like it's an offer, of like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take you to this experience or something like that. But often, yeah, it is just this, the book they didn't think about or the, something a little more elaborate or whatever it is. Um, and for me, one of my defining moments was the Christmas after my parents got divorced, or when my parents separated. They divorced a couple years later. When my father moved out, and I was like 13 at this point. I knew there wasn't a Santa Claus, but still, I was still like the kid who woke up Christmas morning. And my mom knew I was kind of struggling with things a lot, and so she invited me to, after my sister went to bed, help. My sister's a lot younger than I am. Help put together. I think it was a Barbie dream house. It was some kind of like, a dollhouse for Barbie type things that had those three little words that all parents love to see on Christmas Eve: some assembly required. And so we put it together and I got to be a part of doing that. And that was that I think was really the moment where I first understood like what it's about. That it's not just
Mm-hmm.
about getting, it's about giving, it's about creating, it's about, yeah. And we would have those years when it would be, okay, well, I'm Santa now, so I'm going to fill up your stocking, and then I'm going to cover it with a blanket so that you
Mm-hmm.
can fill up my stocking without seeing what I put in your stocking, and all of this. And it's all just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's just this fun thing.
Yeah.
And I do want to quickly interrupt here, by the way, and say, because I did start by saying I'd be talking about both Christmas and Hanukkah, and if you've noticed, I haven't said the word Hanukkah once.
Right.
That's a tradition you have no experience of, right?
I do not.
Okay. So just quick, for those who don't know, Hanukkah is a holiday celebrated by Jewish people. It's a remembrance of political rebellion, really, of a group called the Maccabees, who, when the Greeks were ruling Judea a couple of hundred years before the Romans, and there's all sorts of like political dimensions to the story. I'm not going to get into it. But basically, the idea is that they fought a war, they drove out the Greeks, but there wasn't enough oil to light the lamp that was supposed to reconsecrate the temple in Jerusalem, and so they lit a lamp, and it was only a little bit, but it would take 8 days to go out and get more oil and bring it back. But that the miracle of the lamp was that it kept burning for 8 days. And so that's why we celebrate, as Adam Sandler sings, 8 crazy nights of Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you asked people growing up Jewish in most of the world 100 years ago what their Hanukkah tradition was, they would have looked at you like you were crazy.
Right.
For the most part, it's not one of the important holidays. The Sabbath is the most important holiday once a week on Friday night to Saturday night. But the high holidays are Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Passover or Pesach is a really big deal. Hanukkah became a big deal mostly because Jewish kids were going to school and seeing all their kids get all these presents and going, Mom, why don't we be Christian? That sounds like a lot more fun. And Jewish
Yeah.
parents went, this is a terrible idea. And there's all sorts of stories you can get into about that, and all sorts of debates about is it better to celebrate secular Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is. And I think in my family, like my father's not spiritual the way my mother is. He's connected with Judaism in some ways, but the spirituality of Hanukkah was never a big deal. But I think he still liked that idea of celebrating a tradition together and having a night for gift giving and things like that. And so we have a Hanukkah celebration when we're together, and we light the candles and we say the prayers, but it's nothing like what Christmas is like. But it was sort of how it was celebrated in my father's family.
So no, there's no gift giving, a gift a night kind of a thing.
We got that when we were pretty young kids.
Yeah.
And then I think after that we started to get like, maybe a gift the first and second and then the eighth night.
Okay.
And
There was
then-
I've got a good friend who's he's an attorney, a Jewish and his son obviously Jewish, and I think there was a period where his son was 13, 14 years old and started to negotiate value of gift per night. So like,
Yep.
Dad, if you're going to give me $30 each night, then why don't we just say I'm going to need the first 4 nights up front and get, this video game or something. And I found that so amusing on one level, deeply sad on another. But it's the idea that, boy, isn't it interesting that the same sort of consumerist arguments creep in everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a lot of within Jewish communities that I'm not a part of, and that are much deeper in their community than I am. There's a lot of debate about that. About is it a good thing that is kind of a surrender to Western Christian capitalism in that regard, or is it and there's some people who there's some Jewish families who will say that they celebrate Christmas because at this point it is just literally an American secular holiday. Is for many a religious holiday, myself included. But most of the Christmas songs you hear in malls, the ones that don't have any mention of the religious part, but are all about presents and sleigh bells and all that, they're all written by Jews. Irving Berlin wrote most of them. If not him, a couple other great Jewish songwriters who did fantastic work.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's a whole other debate. But for that part, I wish I had Mandy on to discuss because I'd love to hear more of her thoughts as well, and so we can maybe poke her about it for a future episode. Because I do think it's it is a real question, and I think. Well, and let me put it back now as a question for you. Where have you all, and again, not to get too personal, but you were prying about my childhood. So, where all have you stood in terms of what is Christmas? Like you don't. My understanding is you're not really like the religious aspect isn't as strong for you, or kind of what? How have you negotiated that, especially, and how have you taught it to your kids?
I would say our connection to the religious aspects of the holiday are weak ties. And I'll tell you, it's not without work to get the other way. Like there was when the kids were very, very young, we were members of a church. We loved the church community. It was a Christian church. It was the right kind of sort of ideological sort of balance for us, right? It was more progressive, and kids were baptized, like the works. And I'll say as an aside, the head minister was arrested for stealing, embezzling from the church right out of the tithe box, gambling addiction, like some deeply human brokenness that he needed to recover from. And the experience of going through that as a member of the church community, I think it broke us of any sort of expectation of goodness in organized religion. I don't think we would have put it that way when we were there, but when it came to the holiday season, we realized, oh God, you know what is awesome? We can just be good to each other. Like we can just express our love of being in this family and being kind and generous to one another without any of the baggage of a minister we love dearly who betrayed our beliefs and betrayed what we were. I think we abandoned a bit of the religious ideology around it, and but for better or for worse, we did that. So no judgment. Otherwise, it was an experience for us and our church community, and as such, we're not there anymore. You say you called Christmas a secular American secular holiday. I think we kind of fall right in there, and we have adapted belief systems into this is where we get to show how much we love each other, and that's going to be where it starts and ends.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I certainly, for me as a more religious person, I don't think there's anything in the world wrong with that. I think there are some very interesting philosophical and ethical questions we can raise, because like I think when I listen to like the more fundamentalist evangelical right-wing Christians talk about putting Christ back in Christmas, first of all, they're wrong. Christ giving Christmas means stopping all wars and throwing money at temples and all that kind of stuff, but also like it feels like a rejection of the fact that it is for most people just a secular holiday at this point, and that's okay. The flip side being, I certainly do know some folks, especially Jewish or other religious traditions, who are like, well, I would like there to be a secular holiday that wasn't so steeped in Christian mythology, even if it is mostly divorced from that. I think there's kind of an interesting international question to have about that. That's beyond the scope of this podcast.
Our Arbor Day is up for grabs, really.
Yeah.
I mean, to have at it.
Well, and I think it goes back to that thing that my mom would talk about, that I don't think it is coincidence that and I can only name the kind of three that I've named, but I know it happens in many others, that so many different peoples had holidays that were built around the year. We had a holiday of, the year's coming to an end in the fall with the harvest and hope for the year to come. We have hope in the spring of rebirth and renewal and resurrection as the earth is being resurrected. And in the dead of winter, you celebrate light and the hope of light, the hope of heat and warmth and family and all that. And so with your kids, where was that ever a kind of point of tension because they had friends who were more religious or were less religious, or were they ever curious about that? Kind of how did you teach them about the holidays?
Well, here's an interesting thing. Both of my kids went to a language immersion school. So they were in a class full of kids speaking Chinese with Chinese teachers and everything. So they were taught about the holidays, I think, from a degree removed.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right? And so it was always, I think, more academic, apart from when they were very young and we were going to church and doing all of the sort of stuff that came with the church experience. I think as a result, maybe they were more malleable early to our micro cultural experience. Right. I don't know. I mean, I sort of feel like after they were 10 years old, I had very little sway in what they believed. So, but I do think there is something to that puts me a degree removed from this, because there was no, like, they were not with a broad swath of kids who had the same belief system, right? Everybody had a different system in their classroom, and I think that sort of heterogeneity served them well. They learned a ton about how different cultures celebrate all of these holidays that you rattle off, and that's really a beautiful thing for them to carry on. And it also was a huge weight off our back as parents, because they learned stuff we didn't know. They learned things about how families work that we didn't know and could never in a million years have taught.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, because I think one of the things that can happen is, and this has definitely happened to me somewhat around the holidays, and was a real point of struggle in a weird way, is that when you're not introduced to the idea of, kind of heterodox, lots of different ways of doing things idea, it is easy to get stuck in that. And I think in some ways that was part of why I can't speak for my sister, but I think maybe for her as well, we were stuck in a place for a while of wanting to recreate our mother's Christmas, and we could never do it. And even to the point of, we were not real churchgoers when we were young. We were, Eastern Christmas Christians and the kind of equivalent of Jews. We went to synagogue on the high holidays and church on Easter and Christmas. But the church we went to, right on our corner, St. Paul and St. Andrews, a perfectly nice Methodist church, they did Christmas Eve a very particular way. And it was a beautiful lessons and carol service in which they always sung Silent Night as they turned off all the lights in the sanctuary, and we all lit candles. And right at midnight, the pastor would read the opening passage from John about, in the beginning was the Word and the light, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And we would all sing Joy to the World and go out into the world. And I get goosebumps just mentioning this now, because I've never found a church that did it exactly that same way, and they're all wrong. Like, clearly, that's the way to do it, because that's the way I did it when I was 8 years old.
Yes. Yeah. I see what I'm working with here. And you're absolutely right. When we were 8 years old is the way to do it.
And I think, and like, for me, that there's a spiritual part of that, but it's also, it's like, you get into these conversations about, do you open presents Christmas Eve, or do you open them Christmas morning, or do you open them Christmas evening, or do you open them one at a time, or all this, it's fascinating to me how if we always do it the same way, we can attach so much nostalgia and correctness to it. And then especially when we're trying to recreate it for ourselves with our kids, well, we want to give our kids the same thing we had, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's something really brilliant about that, about like, no, we're creating new traditions, and we're going to learn about the traditions of other people.
Yeah.
Because I think we're saving a lot of heartache in my 30s and my 20s.
Truly. Nostalgia is a virus that we all have to cope with.
Mm-hmm.
It's incurable, and it is something that we all have to address in our own way. I think I think it's really lovely. I love that you brought up that do you open presents Christmas Eve or Christmas morning or Christmas night, and as if there is more than one choice there. I'm there is one right way to do that too. We don't need to litigate it. It's fine just knowing that
So
we
what
both
is the
know
one
what's
right way?
I think it's probably better if we both just know that we're right and not risk the rift that would ensue if our opinions are different. I think we
See,
just have
here
to agree
actually,
in silence.
I have come to believe that the way my parents did it was very specific to what was needed at the time.
Oh,
And so I'm willing to accept that there's lots of different ways in different situations.
okay. Well, then it's Christmas morning.
Okay. See, because what my parents did, which I thought was very smart, was they taught us that the tradition is that you get to take one present with you to bed Christmas Eve and open it first thing Christmas morning.
Oh, fascinating.
Because what they were doing was they wanted to give me and my sister one toy or one book or one thing we could do that
So
would
they could
keep us
sleep in.
occupied so they could sleep in. Exactly that.
That's legit brilliant.
Right?
I-
It's so cynical. It's so perfect.
It is so cynical. We also had the one present in the evening when I was growing up. There was one present the night before, and but the rule was it couldn't be I couldn't pick something that my parents had given me, and so it was usually like, what did my aunt get me? It was like a pair of socks. Yeah, right. Like it was just it was just that was just the joy. Here's a little dopamine hit to get you to bed. And but now our tradition is we each get one gift, and it's something that my wife orchestrates, and it is usually some new pair of cozy pajamas or
Nice.
soft pants and soft sweatshirts for everybody. And that's our Christmas Eve tradition. So it's the same thing. We get a little dopamine hit, but it's always the same.
Yeah.
I will say there is I don't know if I should say this out loud. It's kind of weird, but all right.
Does it
I'll say
involve
it.
cocaine or heroin?
It doesn't. My
Then you're fine.
wife,
Go ahead.
what we've now moved into from sweats and cozy pajama pants, we have a lot of those. And so instead, she started going to MeUndies.com and gets us matching underwear. So my whole family, there are days where you could catch my entire family wearing the same pattern of underwear. And now everybody knows. It might be spider webs. It might be mooses. We've got a lot.
There you go. There you go. Well, let's kind of embrace the whimsy a little bit more and get away from the family therapy and
Yeah.
paying people a couple $100 an hour. It's after Thanksgiving, which to me is the day. Like, you don't do anything Christmas related after Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey comes first. Now we've eaten the big dumb bird to celebrate genocide.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Christmas traditions of December? Like, what are the movies we're watching? What's the music we're listening to? What's Christmas? What's the holiday season like in your household?
Okay, we do have the list of movies. It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street. Like we do the old classics transitions. We do have the transitional episodes, the Christmas episodes of our favorite TV shows. The Christmas episode of Ted Lasso, for example, is always high on the list. Spirited is a newer movie that has made it into the canon of Christmas movies that everybody loves. So that's one we've now watched the last 4 or 5 years, as long as it's been around. And every Christmas Eve, starting right around 10:30, we turn on National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That is the one
Really?
tradition
Okay.
that started with me and my mom and my dad. And that movie came out in the 80s or something, right? So I was already a teenager. And so it was great joy to watch that as a family. And I inflicted it upon my wife, whose tastes do not align with mine in this area, but she adopted it. And now the kids watch it and the in-laws watch it. We watch it every year zealously. We quote the whole thing the rest of the year. It's a really fun shared bit of comedy that we get to have together. So
I love that. For us, it's there's two versions of Muppet Christmas Carol. There's two versions of Christmas Carol that we watch every year, which are my two favorite. and I think are definitively the two best, which is the Muppet one.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess the other one?
Is it Scrooged? Please tell
Yeah.
me it's Scrooged.
It's
Okay.
Scrooged.
All right. Yeah.
And we've not done the National Lampoons, but we do wind up a lot of the time the things like our favorite episodes. West Wing is the one we often will watch a number
Yeah,
of.
that's a good one.
Great, but I think we should add the Ted Lasso one because it's so perfect, and that for those who've seen it, one of the characters just keeps welcoming more and more people into their home. That is my mother. Like that is that scene reminds me so much of my mother's house.
It's what I was thinking about as you were describing that eventually everybody in your home was eating off of a surfboard. Like it just
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's just, and my mother would, especially when I was growing up, me and my friends, we were 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old boys. And so first we wanted, spaceships with laser guns or whatever. And then we were playing role playing. And so it was books about vampires and guns and whatever. And she'd always refer to it as the Christmas slaughter, and she'd make ironic jokes about like,
Jeez.
we're celebrating the birth of the Prince of Peace with, this new toy gun, whatever it was. But we still loved it.
yeah.
And music, though, is always a big, big part of Christmas traditions. The this always confuses people, but not the Muppet Christmas Carol, though that also is a great album. But do you know John Denver and the Muppets Sing Christmas?
Yes, I do. We had that one.
That's a favorite.
Yeah.
A lot of the old traditional like Christmas carols and stuff like that, sung by boys' choirs and stuff like that. What is some of the music you listen to a lot?
Well, my son drives the playlist, and so
Okay.
ever since Pentatonics started doing the annual Christmas albums, Pentatonics became a massive repeat play in the month of
Yeah.
December. The ones that I remember, like Windham Hills, had a couple of years and years ago the Mannheim Steamroller Christmas album. Oh my God. That was heavy rotation during my
Yeah.
teenage years and 20s. And
Trans-Siberian Orchestra, get in there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heavy metal, Carol of the Bells.
Yep, for sure. So, and then the John Denver ones, and then who was the other one? Amy Grant's Christmas. My dad, I think, had a crush on Amy Grant, and so we listened to Amy Grant's Christmas album a lot.
I will just say about the Pentatonics, it is interesting to me because I'm very involved, obviously, in progressive and feminist and LGBT theological circles and stuff on Facebook and the like. And one of the favorite songs to talk about, because it is played so often at this time of year, is "Mary, Did You Know?"
Mm-hmm.
And there's a post that goes around every year at this time. That's very popular in feminist theology circles, that the title of which is, I think, "Yes, She Effing Knew." Because the song itself is one of the best examples of the most condescending, patronizing kind of ideas. Because, the song is about Mary, did you know all these things that would happen? Literally, like the angel tells her, and she sings a song in the Bible, the Magnificat, about all the ways she knew. And so there's a lot of feminist theologians that are really like, can we get rid of that song forever? It is so ridiculous. But then and I remember listening to reading a whole day of this and being like, we got to get rid of that. Yeah, of course, it's an awful song. And then I listened to the Pentatonics version, which is so incredibly beautiful. And it was this clash moment. And here again, this is more the religious side of things. So since then, you haven't been to church at all on Christmas, I assume, right?
No, we don't do church. In fact, you described the midnight, silent night. We actually do that on our back porch with my in-laws and the kids, and we stand outside and we light candles, and we are in the dark, and we try to sing Christmas carols. And what we've learned over the last, as long as we've been doing it, many years, nobody ever learns or relearns the words to the Christmas carols. We sometimes carry an iPad, but I live in Oregon, so it's pouring rain most Christmas Eves. And so we have an embarrassment of riches of first verses, and then we move on to the next song.
Verses. They're always crazy.
There's no second verses. It's a no second verse sing-along.
And I ask because I was a pastor for many years, as you know, and I was part of a very progressive church, the United Church of Christ, which has, I think, made a very good effort, as of some of the other progressive churches, to address the fact that we have a lot of patriarchal language in our churches and all the God is he and stuff like that, and that there's a lot of good things, and that the lyrics of some of the hymns have been updated. And I'll admit to being a complete and total hypocrite, because a lot of that I love. But I remember, like, when I was at the church I last served about 10 years ago, we had this new hymnal that had redone the lyrics to all the Christmas songs, trying to make them less kind of like my Lord and He, and they were just god awful.
Yeah.
So it was always this thing of like, yes, we know God isn't He, but like we're gonna sing that language because "O come, Emmanuel, ransom captive Israel," which has political and theological implications we're not talking
What?
about, but that's the line we know. "O come,
Yeah.
Emmanuel," and
Here's the thing. I think it is overstated the number of people who sing the words to Christmas songs and are paying attention to what those words are.
well, it turns out that theologians want to pay attention to things that nobody else wants to pay attention to. And I say that as someone with 2 master's degrees in
Yeah.
these things. I spent an awful lot of money to pay attention to these
Thinking
things that
really hard about these things.
no one else cares about, because the tune is beautiful. And I think there was a humility to me for that in that moment around Mary Did You Know? Because I think that if you want to understand the way that kind of mansplaining idea can apply in the church, there's an important conversation to have about why is that song so popular when it is such a rejection of like the literal biblical record. But it's also just a gorgeous song at Christmas time, And I
Yeah.
think for me, that's a lot of like, there's a lot of pick your battles, this time of year.
There-
And a lot of like, there are traditions
Yes.
that we can enjoy that don't come from the back. Like I made a joke earlier about Thanksgiving eating a big dumb bird to celebrate genocide. The political and social history around Thanksgiving is horrific and awful. But also there's something great about being thankful and coming together with the family about that. And I don't know, I'm preaching now. I apologize. I'll let you jump in. But to me, I think that's Go ahead.
It's important. It really is important, and I think I think you land on something here. I mean, how often do we talk about celebrate the art, not the artist? Like
Yeah.
one of the things that these songs do is they tie us together, not just as people contemporaneously, but they tie us together across time. And I think being able to celebrate with the words and song that were sung by generations before us is important, even as we recognize the complexity of the changing cultural expectations around gender and patriarchy and all of those things.
Yeah.
There is something about singing these songs that ties me not to my parents, not to me as a kid, but to my grandfather's grandmother, right? Like
Yeah.
it goes back generations knowing that they were celebrating the same thing at this very time, and I think that's beautiful. The other thing that I will humbly ask, if you ever find yourself getting tied up in lyrics that are aging poorly, is just remember what if the song was in Latin? Because you probably don't understand Latin, and you could just celebrate voice as instrument. Voice as instrument gets you out of a lot of stuff. It's just pretty to hear it sung in the human voice, which is a beautiful, beautiful agent of light this
really
time
is,
of
yeah.
year. So
It really is. There's so much more we can go into. There's a whole conversation about gifts that I want to bring Mandy into as well. So we'll
sure.
hold that for last time. I'm just going to end with one of the most important questions of the season, and one that comes up a lot in media circles. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
100% yes. I don't even need to adjudicate this.
Okay. I would say no. I would say
Okay.
it is a movie that takes place at Christmas. But to me, it is not about that Christmas Carol. Like it doesn't have any of the Christmas
Yeah.
spirit.
Well,
It's a
okay.
phenomenal movie.
It's a
great
phenomenal movie, and I would say this is my position on it. The argument around whether Die Hard is or is not a Christmas movie that happens every year at Christmas has defined the nature of movie lovers as people who love Christmas. And for me, that makes Die Hard an agent of Christmas.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I will close then with that, everybody. Come, they told me, pa-ra-pa-bum-bum. You've now heard the Drummer Boy. You've lost the game. Whatever holidays you celebrate, may this time be joyous for you. May it be a time of family and light and hope. And for all those who are, there's also stuff I could go into now about, there's a whole other thing I want to talk about now about how it's really hard to celebrate some years without family. I would just say to everyone, if it is a hard time of year, hope you are not alone. If you're with family, if family is hard for you, whatever it is, we wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy Kwanzaa. Well, all the holidays may light and love fill your life. And signing off. And we're out.